migrated from the old networks, and the FCC allows them to discontinue those networks. In most states, 95% of households are being served by broadband providers and are connected to high-speed broadband fiber networks, which means there's only about 5% of the population still covered by these copper networks. Yet the providers are required to maintain those old networks at a huge cost to providers, but also to consumers. This is also inconsistent with how other technology transitions have taken place. For example, when wireless providers have migrated from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, they were not required to keep their old 2G network running, and they just simply moved on to, so they could offer consumers the new technology. Compared to copper networks, which were built to provide voice service, customers are utilizing broadband networks to get better service, allowing them to be robust participants in the internet ecosystem. Not only do copper networks require far more energy to use and operate, requiring maintenance of copper networks means that some consumers could be getting more service, but they're not. The goal with network modernization is to level the playing field and ensure that all communities, regardless of where they are, receive the most robust service possible. As part of that effort, broadband providers are offering multiple options to consumers to ensure that communities have continuous and reliable communication service when copper is retired. The problem is that the regulatory regime is not keeping up with technology, and it's not serving the public good. In our conversation today, we're going to talk to representatives from various stakeholders of some often underrepresented communities and learn more about why network modernization is important to their communities and what can be done to improve the status quo. So I'll ask our panelists to join us. And one by one, I will let folks introduce themselves and talk about who they're with, where they're from, who they represent, all of that good stuff. Carlos, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. And Lynn, thank you so much for that really great table setting for this conversation. My name is Carlos Gutierrez. I am the Deputy Director and General Counsel for LGBT Tech. We are the I think, largest national organization that focuses specifically on the needs of marginalized communities like the LGBTQ+ community and technology issues. We're unique in that we rely on a lot of our programs to drive our policy, and that the work we do is really focused on the end user experience. We do a lot of work around research in digital communications, digital discrimination and equity, privacy, spectrum deployment, data privacy, and a lot of this work is grounded in research that we have launched in different areas and in our programmatic work. Our Power On program provides technology to LGBTQ+ organizations and community members. Currently, it spans 107 partner centers across 37 states, and it allows us to distribute life-saving technology at grassroots levels. And to date, we have distributed over $400,000 worth of tech that reached more than 300,000 individuals. Another one of the programs that we're proud of that also provides a feedback loop for conversations such as this is our PATHs program. And our PATHs program is dedicated to creating visibility around LGBTQ+ individuals that work in STEAM and empowering LGBTQ+ youth to pursue their passion into these fields. And we have 3 different prongs to this program. Our interview program, where we interview LGBTQ professionals and tell their stories about being part of the LGBTQ+ community and the path they took to get into the STEAM careers. Season 4 of our PATHs program is currently live, and season 5 and 6 of our PATHs program will be airing in 2024 and 2025. We also provide educational grants. We grant up to $5,000 for STEAM education. To date, we have supported 20 grantees for about $80,000 in grants. And finally, we have an ongoing robust mentorship program. And this program is open to the community at large and focuses on helping LGBTQ+ individuals enter and advance STEAM careers. Mentees participate in monthly mentorship meetings and career development workshops and events, while paired with an LGBTQ+ mentor of their choosing to have one-on-one guided assistance. All of these programs impact our community, and the technology, obviously, that we're talking about today and the modernization we're talking about today is really crucial to maintaining all of these programs going and the focus that we have on marginalized communities.
Thanks, Carlos. Tina, let's turn to you.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to all the organizers of the panels. Looking forward to a great conversation today. My name is Tina Metzer. I am co-founder of National Center for Resource Development and also co-founder of Rural Rise and Rural Rise Tech. And Rural Rise Tech is really founded, and we're a community of organizations that really strive to increase opportunities and prosperity for rural and remote communities. And we really recognize that location shouldn't be the determining factor in success. Everything we should do in education and entrepreneurship, that should make a difference in where we're located. Let me take a step back and tell you how we were founded. It was in 2017, and we had a large amount of federal partners and other nonprofits, and we were working in the rural space. And we decided, hey, there's great things happening in rural America. There may be a great program in Arkansas. There may be a great program in Maine or in West Virginia. How can we share those resources and programming? We were founded that we need to share resources. We need to share, develop a community of practice, and also our challenges. I'm going to share a quick story. We had our first conference in West Virginia in 2017. And I see actually in the audience, we have some people that were at that first conference. And I bring that up because we're like, hey, we're going to bring rural community members and people that are interested in rural communities to West Virginia. It's a 3-hour drive. And I said, and by the way, the last hour, you probably won't have any connectivity. And people were like, oh, no, that's impossible. I really need to do work. I really need that connectivity. And I was like, welcome to our community. We would like to have that connectivity all the time, every day. We don't always have that connectivity luxury. So I'm really thrilled to be here today to talk about one of our passions in Rural Rise, and is to really give a voice to rural communities and how important that network modernization and broadband is. So thank you, Lynn and panelists.
Thanks, Tina. I'll go around the screen for my view, and next is Deborah.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to Carlos and his colleagues for hosting this today. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Deborah Berlin, and I'm Executive Director of Project Goal, which is the project to get older adults, which works on exactly that, to close the digital divide for the 65 plus community, our aging adults. And when Project Goal started about 15 years ago, the divide for older adults in getting broadband at home was significant. And I'll talk a little later about how we've been working to close that divide. But Project Goal works to try and get older adults to recognize the benefits of getting online, of getting on the internet, and the incredible world that is there for them in terms of using the internet. And so the Project Goal works on aging, technology, and creating a new voice for that effort. So I'm very pleased to be here and joining everyone and all of the others on this panel. Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks, Deborah. And last is Marcy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marcy Roth. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of the World Institute on Disability. Thanks so much for including me, for including the World Institute on Disability, also known as WID. We are one of the world's oldest disability-led organizations. We were founded in 1983 by people with disabilities, and we have been continually led by people with disabilities for 41 years now. We focus on the rights and opportunities of, in the US, 27% of the US population, people with disabilities, and globally, 1.3 billion people with disabilities, many of whom have a number of other identities. We represent people who are multiply marginalized, people who are older, who live in rural communities, people who identify as LGBTQ plus, people who have many other intersecting identities. And we focus in several key areas. In particular, and important to today's conversation, excuse me, we work to ensure that people with disabilities have digital access as well as access to the built environment. And I look forward to talking more about all of that. One key area that I'm particularly excited to be involved in is the UN Secretary General's Early Warnings for All initiative. And this is an initiative that will that has committed to providing early warning to every person on the planet by 2027. This will require the kind of accessibility throughout all of our connectivity that makes it possible for everyone to be able to take personal protective measures and support their community in these challenging times we live in now and in the future. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Marcy. And so I think what we heard from all of those panelists so far is that one of the big issues here is access. So let's start with access to service. Carlos, how has modern broadband improved access to critical LGBTQ plus resources and support networks, particularly in remote and underserved areas?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that, unfortunately for you all, we just launched a whole new set of research on digital habits. So you're going to be hearing a few stats along the way from me. So get ready. One of the first things I'll start with is that obviously reliable communication is key for everyone, but it's specifically important for marginalized communities like the LGBTQ plus community. Broadband and access to these kind of technologies enable LGBTQ plus people to have seamless communication with friends, families, and allies, reducing isolation, especially in rural and other communities. We are actually very heavy users of services. We are online a lot earlier than other communities are. We spend a lot more time online. Our latest research kind of shows that 93% of us access the internet via smartphones, and 96% of LGBTQ plus adults use the internet at least once a day, compared to 89% of the overall population. So we are definitely over-indexing. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the main reasons being that we are one of the few marginalized communities that can be discriminated against in their own home. So we don't always have the option of going to our home and being able to talk about discrimination issues with our families, because often our families can be the discrimination. So a lot of LGBTQ plus individuals rely on technology for community building, for answering questions about their identity that they may not feel comfortable asking at home. So those kind of issues are the things that allow the reliable communication allows us to have access to. It gives us access to social platforms and virtual events. And on a more kind of, critical note, emergency services, modern networks that allow emergency communications, ensuring that LGBTQ plus individuals are getting information during crisis and have access to help when they need it, as well as enhanced safety measures. So, communications like the suicide hotline 988, text to 911 systems that can geolocate where you are. All of those things are really key for our community as well as other communities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you, Carlos. Marcy, from your perspective, what do we mean when we're referring to effective communications access for people with disabilities?
Thanks for that question. Effective communication access not only means that people need to have information in the formats that make it possible for them to fully participate, but that the information that they're receiving needs to be actionable. So when we're giving people information in only one format, they often either don't actually have access to that information, or perhaps they don't know what to do with the information if they have it. So it needs to be effective. It needs to be usable. And so when we're talking about people with disabilities, some people are blind, others have low vision. Some people are deaf, others are hard of hearing. Some people have cognitive disabilities, others have intellectual disabilities, and sometimes because of mental health disabilities, processing can be challenging for some folks. So in order for everyone to have equitable access to the information that is available out across our fabulous world, we need to make sure that information is equally effective for everyone. And in fact, not only is that a nice to have, it's a legal requirement here in the US, and it is part of the human rights obligations of all of the countries that participate in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Thanks.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the new modern technologies really that you need that power of broadband to get that to everybody equitably. I think that makes a lot of sense. Deb, why is it important for older adults to have broadband and modernize their network communications?
Yeah, thanks. And it's great to have listened to Carlos and Marcy speak, because, so many of these issues are the same for older adults, but what makes older adults different as well? So we cross into so many of these same paths, but there are some differences as well. So let me just back up for a minute. I want to provide set the table a bit for aging. First of all, the demographics in the US and the world are changing in terms of the global population. We're all getting older. The world is getting older. By 2030, we're expecting 1.4 billion people to be 60 and older. In the US, by 2034, the 65 plus population will outnumber those under the age of 18. So we're getting older. We need to consider what are the needs of the aging population. And in terms of broadband, we've seen some significant differences in terms of adoption. When Project Goals started, 35% of those 65 and older had broadband in their home. Now, 70% of older individuals have adopted broadband. So while we could say great news, but that means 30% of older adults still don't have that connection. And that's a considerable number of people in the US who don't have access to those important services that we've just talked about. So that's a great consideration. And one thing I want to mention is that one very important consideration in aging is isolation. And we talked about that. And I know that's an issue in rural communities. I know Carlos mentioned that as well. But for aging, you can be isolated in an apartment building and where many older adults live. So a modern network, a broadband connection can help reduce that isolation factor. And so for an older individual, that can mean a better connection to communicate with family and friends, a better connection to getting information, as Marcy mentioned, emergency information. So all of that is critically important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all part of this thing we've all been talking about for a while, which is, closing the digital divide, right, for all of the communities. And I know, Tina, that's particularly true in rural America. And, there's government programs right now focused on that. But how can modernizing network connections enhance the reliability and quality of communication services in rural areas, especially during emergency situations like power outages, wildfires, and floods?
Right. Thank you, Lynn. That's a great question. Many times we don't quite realize what life is like in a rural communities in those situations. Living in a rural community is great. That's why people love to live here. It's beautiful. It's a great quality of life, great people, lots of things to do. However, if you move or you live here, you soon realize that there are challenges, and those challenges are the limited connectivity. And the other thing is generally there's a travel distance involved with everything we do. And, we'll kind of talk about that as we talk about telehealth and some other things in this conversation. But those all play into how do you handle emergency situations? A good example was not an emergency, but last night I lost my electricity due to storms. So my electricity went out. I have a landline and I have fiber, so I'm able to get internet. I do not have a cell phone. That is where I get my cell phone coverage. So I had my old type, my landline. I called up the electric company, reported my electric was out. And usually I have my 1 bar of cell phone service out, but it was storming, so I couldn't even go out to find that. And many people around me probably dialed up on an old type rotary phone to report their electric was out. And I bring that up because especially in small remote areas, when there's an emergency, there are amazing volunteer firefighters and EMS workers. So if you trace that, how do we get help in an emergency? If I were outside, I could not have called for 911 because I didn't have that backup plan. I didn't have a cell phone. So it's very important as we kind of modernize the connectivity, we have access to additional, that modernization. I think it's like an estimated 80% of calls are from wireless calls of 911 to US. So, it would be nice to have for rural communities that access that we can call. Real-time alerts in emergency situations. If there's an emergency situation, can you alert your community that this is happening? We have a wildfire happening. You may need to evacuate. If we're dependent only on a landline, that way we'd have to stay in. If we're outside, will we get those emergency response? So all of those things kind of play into the public warning systems, disaster preparedness. We need to have like a really resilient and redundant systems to create a really good, solid backup for emergency situations.
Yes. Go ahead. Keep going.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, I was just going to say, so it sounds like, increased capacity would also help public safety officials too, in addition to the rural Americans that are out there.
Oh, absolutely. As we go out, if there was a wildfire, people need to communicate. We need that ability to communicate those emergencies and to get assistance to people before, during, and after emergencies.
Yeah. Marcy, similarly for your community, what role does accessibility play for people with disabilities in disasters or emergencies?
Well, the ability to get actionable information is of paramount importance in a disaster. I will also share a personal story. And thanks to the modernization of the networks, I had a life-saving experience not too long ago. I fell in my garage, hit my head, and had a pretty significant injury. My watch told me that it seemed as though I had fallen, and did I want 911 to be notified? Which, yes. So fortunately, I had enough connectivity that I was able to be connected with 911. And then it occurred to me that I was in a locked garage in the dark, and I was also in a house that had the front door locked. But I was very fortunate to have an electronic lock on my front door. So as I lay in the dark on the floor in my garage, I was able to unlock my front door. This is an incredible example of the kind of interactive communications that people have more and more access to every day. And in a disaster, many people are going to need that information in formats that are accessible to them. Many people are reluctant to say goodbye to the old copper lines, and yet I think people are starting to understand that connectivity to medical equipment becomes far more possible. Connectivity to information that can be customized for your particular accommodation needs becomes more possible. And so as I've had conversations with people with disabilities living in rural areas, people who have limited access right now to broadband, I know that that 5G access is going to be a real game changer in not only in disasters, but in individual optimizing health situations as well.
Wow, Marcy, well, let me just say for all of us, we're really glad you're okay. And that's a very scary story. Gosh, yeah, I can't even imagine it's great that you were able to take those steps. While we're talking about disasters and emergencies and all of that, we're clearly living in a world where natural disasters are an ever-growing concern. And what goes hand in hand with that is the need for all Americans to be more environmentally conscious. So Tina, I'll ask you, are there any benefits to moving to more fiber-centric network in rural communities, and how can this transition assist with climate resilience?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. And one of my other passions along with rural is the climate resiliency. And I think this is a great time as network modernization is taking place. There's a lot of different modeling types now available. There's different ways that providers can plan for those climate patterns that are happening. We may want to look at a specific path and say, okay, this is where it's always been, but now with climate related hazards, we may want to design something different. We may want to get out of that. It's now flooding. It's near a coastal flooding plain. Or some other reason it needs to be. So it's a good opportunity now to have really sustainable practices as we develop broadband and improve those network modernizations in rural communities.
Yeah, and I know just from the provider perspective, as far as helping the environment, what's required power-wise to operate the old copper network servers, which are huge, they put out tons and tons of energy. So, which is just, such a waste. So it's really important aspect is we're doing multiple things here, improving what kinds of services and access folks can have, but also helping improve environmental situation that we all live in. So that's really important.
Yeah, makes it very sustainable as we kind of look forward.
Absolutely.
And to the future for those modeling that what is going to happen in our communities. Yep,
absolutely. So we'll talk some more about some different aspects of this that affects your specific groups. And Deb, I know we talked a little bit about how modernizing networks will increase and improve the lives of older Americans, but what are some of the costs of not moving forward for older adults?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. So I do want to talk about that. The benefits and the costs of of modernizing the network. I just want to start by saying, Marcy, thank you for that story. And I want to react to a couple things first. You know, and particularly with the older adult community, I am the first one in line as a proponent for technology, for adopting as much technology as we can. But I also recognize that not everybody can afford the bells and whistles. And so when it comes to modernizing the network, this is one very simple and cost-effective thing that older adults can do. Because actually now it costs less to have this fiber phone modernized. Can hold on to your copper wires. And I'm not sure that older adults recognize that. So that's first and foremost, that it's cost effective. And I want to also pick up on two things that Marcy mentioned, and that's that two words, connectivity and customization. I really like that, Marcy, and I think that that's critically important for the aging community as well. So, you know, in terms of what are the costs and what are the things that we can look at, you know, there are, in terms of modernizing and the benefits, you know, advanced functions that you have that, you know, you cost less, but you get more. So, you know, you have other functions that you can get from a you can hold on to your, if you feel like, okay, I want to hold a real phone, you know, I like the way my phone looks, and that's important to me. And I know that is important to a lot of older individuals. They want something that looks and feels like the phone that they've had. You can still hold on to that. So, you know, you can have that handset that looks and feels like a real handset. So, you know, there is the benefit there. You know, the cost is not being connected to the advancements that we are moving forward to. And that is a real loss to everyone, to not be able to move forward with technology. You may not want all the bells and whistles, and that's okay. You may not want the you know, the smart home, although there are so many benefits to that. But you need the advancements that will at least give you the customization, the connectivity, the lower costs, and the advanced functions that you can get from network modernization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Tina, you know, we've just been hearing, right, all these great benefits that come with modernization. But when you look at rural America, are there some initiatives that will need to be in place to help rural residents, seniors in particular, perhaps, to adapt to new communications technologies?
Yeah, excellent point, Lynn. As we have this great opportunity now to bring more connectivity to rural America, it's going to transform lives of people in all rural communities. However, I don't think it's going to be as simple as saying, hey, welcome to the internet. Here's a smartphone and computer. Like, there is going to be a learning curve. That's why, like, the digital literacy piece is going to be very, very important, especially for seniors, as we kind of bring them on board. Because as I said, it's going to be life-changing. That digital literacy program, as we work with people and as providers come in, we're so used to using our smart devices, but if you think back, it's not that many years ago when we didn't have those devices. We had to learn to use that. It is a technology. To us right now, it's second nature. But if you have never really used a smartphone, have never had a cell phone, those are new technologies. And so for the industry, I think it's going to be really crucial to acknowledge that just simply offering a technology is not the answer, because it doesn't guarantee adoption. As Deb said, people are on tight budgets, so we have to say, okay, I know you're on a tight budget and you need to afford these technologies, but they're going to really help you. It's going to be an added expense. We have to address those. We really have to work with community providers, maybe Department of Aging's, different community organizations in rural communities that are really going to be trusted and are really going to help ensure that seniors and other people that have questions or don't quite understand what to do, that they are brought on board, that they will have some training to that. And on special note too, the risk and the, like the fraud, the potential for the bad characters to come into play. There needs to be some sort of safety training as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, part of the equity and inclusion sort of discussion aspects that we've been talking about. And I know, Marcy, your organization, World Institute on Disability, there's some aspects of this that are related to sort of global disability inclusion. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So many important points have been made throughout this discussion. And, again, the intersecting identities of all of the people we're talking about are inclusive of people with disabilities. And globally, we certainly see that there is a gap between the people who are most marginalized and the rest of communities, even, across the global South. The impact of poverty coupled with, stigma and bias, limit the access of so many people. But it is that connectivity that provides people with the opportunities for employment, for education, for access to healthcare, to the kinds of things that level the global playing field so that everyone has an opportunity to be a full participant. And, as we have seen the cost go down in many ways, and, as we see the potential for eliminating the most costly and most climate impacting approaches to connectivity, replaced with lower cost, higher performing alternatives, those are going to be especially helpful for people with disabilities if we center accessibility in all of those advancements. The fact that I am at this table today as part of this conversation gives me tremendous hope that we are in fact centering people with disabilities and our accessibility as we look to modernize the very important, future leaning connectivity initiatives. And I'm especially grateful to our colleagues who are working in broadband to continually invest in and support organizations like mine so that we can, in fact, be a part of this very important transformation. Thanks.
Absolutely. We're all partners in this, which is really so important. And one of the things you referenced was, various things like telehealth and education. So let's get into that a little bit. So Carlos, what impact has telehealth had on the LGBTQ community, and how can improved network connectivity further enhance access to the specialized LGBTQ affirming healthcare services?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, this is a really important question for our community. But before that, I just want to say I'm just so happy and struck by the intersectionality of this panel and kind of the ability for all us to have this conversation. I'm so proud to be part of this conversation. Deb and I have done work together. We've done op-eds on aging. Any of us could be working with anybody else on these issues. So the impact on marginalized communities is so important, and panels like this that kind of show how we are all interconnected are so key. So thank you for that. When it comes to telehealth, LGBTQ plus communities do have a specific need when it comes to technology. We've already talked a little bit about the isolation that LGBTQ people can feel in rural or remote communities. And then you kind of put a layer of that of discrimination as well, and you can start to see why telehealth and access to health services online would be really important. These kind of telehealth service networks provide LGBTQ plus individuals with access to specialized healthcare providers that they may not have access to in their own communities, without the need for traveling long distances. And this is really crucial for people who are looking for LGBTQ plus affirming healthcare services, which are not always found in smaller communities. You can see a situation where someone has somehow kind of healthcare issue that is specific to their identity or sexual orientation, and they may live in a small town where their doctor is their parents' best friend or go to the same church, and they may not feel comfortable kind of having open and frank conversations about their health issues with someone in a place where they're not going to be able to get the privacy and confidentiality they need. And that kind of our research that we've done and other research that has been done by others bear this out. 87% of LGBTQ plus adults use the internet to search for health and medical information, compared to 59% of the general public. When we talk about telehealth specifically, 66% of LGBTQ plus adults use the internet to find telehealth compared to 43% of the general public. And then just generally, nearly half of adults, 45%, look for LGBTQ plus friendly healthcare online. And this number jumps to 70% when we start talking about transgender individuals. And there's obviously an incredible need for transgender individuals to have access to telehealth services. Those are the those individuals have issues and questions that are probably not within the expertise of most people that are in their community. So for transgender individuals specifically, telehealth services become super, super important. And this is important because another survey tells us that LGBTQ plus individuals are twice as likely to report discrimination during healthcare visits than non-LGBTQ plus individuals. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and just research that shows that LGBTQ plus people do face barriers in accessing healthcare and getting proper healthcare when their identity becomes an issue. So the telehealth access, especially in remote and rural communities, is frankly life-saving and life-changing for LGBTQ plus individuals across the country and in these communities.
Yeah, thanks for that, Carlos. That's so important. And you mentioned there at the end about rural. So Tina, I know, and you mentioned it earlier, we're in rural America. We all know that homes are really far apart. People aren't just next door to a hospital or a doctor's office. So how can modernized network infrastructure help support telehealth services in rural areas and reducing the need for that sort of long distance travel just to get access to healthcare?
Right. Thank you, Lynn. And Carlos, excellent points. I mean, it just kind of reiterate what you said. I mean, those were great points. I love the data. And as you said, Lynn, when you're in a rural community, the doctor is most likely going to be 45 minutes to several hours away. So how can, and that journey is difficult, especially for seniors or for other people, that it's difficult. So telehealth allows us to reduce long distance travel. That's a huge part. And to kind of build to what Carlos said, access to mental health services as well. Like it's so important. You may not have the capacity, or you may not want to have someone drive you to go to counseling, but you have access to mental health services. And it's so essential to have that in rural communities. Access to specialists. All of those things are so important. And we talked about Marcy, you earlier with those devices. Those also come into telehealth because you may be able to monitor yourself from out traveling, spending a whole day travel. You may be able just to monitor some of your things from your home. And that's a huge difference. And it really, as more and more hospitals close in rural communities, this allows us access to those specialists. It allows us to talk to people that we may have to like take a couple day trip or a couple hours to do that. And telehealth, I think Carlos brought this up, trust and familiarity, like really in rural communities, we always trust our community members. But the pandemic has really accelerated the acceptance of telehealth. We know that, okay, we can actually do this. If we have the connectivity, if we have modernization of networks, we can actually use telehealth and we don't have to spend the day on the road. We can, if we have the connection. And that is very important that we have stable, that connection. We can actually have a video call with those healthcare providers. And it's just a better quality of life for all rural communities to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, the pandemic at 100%, gave rise to the need for telehealth services. And one of the other things that the pandemic pointed out was that we need to have connectivity to continue education in some instances. So, Carlos, let's talk about how increased connectivity opened up educational and employment opportunities for LGBTQ individuals.
Yeah, for sure. Again, a very important question, and a lot of the same issues come into play when we talk about education and employment that come with telehealth. Discrimination within communities, and all these issues also impact employment. As you can imagine, 79% of LGBTQ plus adults use the internet to search for jobs and application, and 60% use it to network. And the issue here, and the reason why it's so important, is because 46% of LGBTQ plus workers have reported that they have received unfair treatment or discrimination at some point in their career because of their sexual orientation or because of their gender identity. So the ability to do something like distance learning, where they can do learning on topics that may not be taught locally in smaller communities, but also the ability to do it in a safe environment. It gives them the ability to have digital learning tools that allow LGBTQ plus students to pursue education from a safe and supportive environment, and avoiding potential harassment and traditional settings. And again, for the trans community, this becomes an even bigger issue and an even more important kind of safe harbor. When it comes to job opportunities, the enhanced connectivity really helps LGBTQ plus individuals access job training programs, remote work opportunities. And one of the things why we've seen as we talk about these new technologies like XR, so like, our XR technologies, virtual reality technologies, augmented reality technologies, there's such a great promise for those kind of technologies to really shake up the way employment is done these days. There are the ability for people to put on a headset and do job training from anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world for a lot of these positions. I've seen demos of firemen being trained in virtual houses where they have to like fight a virtual fire. Even people who are like doing pipe fitting have been able to do this in a virtual environment. So these technologies give access to opportunities for everyone, especially in rural communities. And it gives opportunities to people who may be in a community where they're not appreciated in the same way, or they're being discriminated against. So it's a great equalizer and really important for the economic and progression of LGBTQ plus communities.
Awesome. Thanks, Carlos. And as we're closing in on the top of the hour, I just want to ask our guests, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. We'll get to those in just a minute. I want to just cover one more thing that we have not talked about yet, and that's precision agriculture. And Tina, since you're our rural representative here, let's pivot a little bit and talk about how modern networks can improve and enhance precision ag efforts, and which drives economic growth and sustainability.
Absolutely, Lynn. And, I'm going to kind of take it a step further, that we've all kind of heard about the precision ag. And also one of my things is we are not all farmers in rural communities. I am not a farmer, but it's so important because we all eat. And the precision ag, we've all heard those stories about how the large farmers especially they're increasing profitability with that precision ag. But another thing I wanted to bring up was small farmers, people that are really on small farms. They may be selling produce. It's that the ability to sell your product quickly by having internet access is huge, and it really impacts a lot of different people. And small farmers are also using, and I bring up small farmers because there's so many, the statistics of each state, how many people are in those small entrepreneurship farms. A lot of small farmers sell their produce, and they do that via the internet, just like everyone else does. They have that ability. Hey, I have tomatoes. I'm going to post this on, and I'll be able to do that. Another interesting thing that I'm finding, Lynn, in farming communities and the importance of network modernization is if you get a stable internet connection to your home, many farmers are setting up networks or having people set them up networks that they're having mesh networks that they can be in the field. And when we were talking about earlier with those Wi-Fi, if there's an accident, they have the ability to call 911 via their Wi-Fi network. That's a game changer. We have a lot of older farmers that, like, you have to get up in the middle of the night. Can you imagine? And now they have the ability to put cameras in their sheds and in their barns. And instead of getting up in the middle of the night, they're like, oh, okay, everything's fine. I'm going back to bed. Those are all game-changing technologies that are making farming more profitable, and it's making it a better, really, for younger people to really get excited about farming, because there's all these cool gadgets now, and I can do all of these neat things. So I love the fact that it is really impactful for the farming community.
Yeah, I've actually had the opportunity to work in some precision ag groups, and there are some really cool technologies. And I actually had a Zoom with somebody who was on his tractor while he was talking to me.
Really?
So yeah. So there's a lot of cool technologies out there that are only possible if there's a really good, strong fiber connection. Yeah. So with just a few minutes left, I want to open it up to some questions, and I see at least one here. And again, I encourage folks to go ahead and put some in the Q&A if you have them. First one here, I think, is going to be directed towards you, Carlos. It says, access is unquestionably the first and most important step. However, how does information literacy play in? And that's a critical step as well. And how do we champion LGBTQ plus groups to consume accurate information and are partnering with actual allies and members of the community?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's actually a great question. One of the programs that I did not mention in the many programs I listed that LGBT tech's involved in is our digital navigator program. We hired a digital navigator when the affordable connectivity program was on the table specifically to teach members of our community how to take access of the subsidy that was afforded by the affordable connectivity program. That role has now expanded to digital literacy and education. And I'm really proud to say that because of our program on do you want to say something, Deb? Okay. Because
yeah, she'll go after.
Through our Power On program, we have access to 107 centers directly. We also work with CenterLink, which is the center of centers. They're the umbrella organization that kind of oversees all of the LGBTQ plus community centers. Not only that, but we have a lot of partnerships with other groups that work with other marginalized communities. For example, the multimedia, technology, communications. They just did a Juneteenth Black churches event where they work with Black churches to do digital education. So we are very aware of this. We work with other organizations that do this work, and we are directly working with community with our digital navigator program for this. But it is important that our community hears from our own people on these programs. So thank you. And Deb, over to you.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about this in our last few minutes anyway. So that's a great question. And I just wanted to jump in on the literacy issue, the digital literacy issue, which is so important for older adults. And that is one of the barriers to adopting new technology. And I wanted to just recognize that it is such an important issue that it is actually one of the components of the BEAD of the programs and the dollars that the federal government has put in to the states. And so I'm hopeful that with partners nationally and in the states, that we will see some effort towards literacy programs. And I know also, I want to also recognize the fact that the internet service providers have also been working with partners and doing some digital literacy efforts as well. So, you know, that is critically important for the aging community, and to recognize the work that has been done and that hopefully will progress further.
Yeah, thanks for that, Deb. That's very true. Providers are working hard to improve literacy throughout all of this. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I just want to say this has been such an interesting and really good discussion. As Carlos said, this intersectionality of all these groups and how we all can work together and partner on this particular issue, which is getting further equity and connectivity via network modernization. I think that's just such an important topic, and I hope that more folks continue to have these conversations as the efforts move forward with the BEAD program and other programs that are out there to close the digital divide and make sure that everybody has access to really fast, powerful networks, and so they can participate in the internet ecosystem fully. So thanks everybody for attending. We really appreciate your participation today, and thanks to LGBTQ Tech for hosting, and hopefully we'll have other opportunities to convene like this in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.